Hello, I'm Neil Saravandamutu. Welcome to the Better Ottawa podcast. We will be launching in March, and as I've previously explained, there'll be two elements to the podcast. The first will be long-form interviews with different experts around the city who can help us delve into some issues in more detail. The second element is a municipal panel. Some of you will remember that many years ago, we had a municipal panel weekly on morning radio. Well, I am delighted today to bring back that panel. We have with us here Joanne Chianello, previously of CBC News, and we have also John Willing, previously of Ottawa Citizen. So welcome to you both.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Neil.
Maybe we can begin by the two of you explaining what you've been up to since you left your respective journalistic roles.
Yeah, so I actually left CBC in 2023, the spring. So it's been almost 2 years. I can't believe it. After, I want to say, 3 decades in journalism. I had a little bit of burnout, time for a change. And so I've always loved municipal affairs, and I went to a consulting firm that does a lot of work with municipalities. So I worked there for a while. I worked for Association of Municipalities of Ontario. I did work on the long-term financial plan for Toronto. In fact, I personally wrote some of the parts that were in Mayor Olivia Chow's New Deal. So that was very exciting to see that come to life. I got a lot of ideas for Ottawa. And then I transitioned from there to being a senior advisor for that firm. I'm doing a lot of community volunteering with my local community association, a nonprofit housing organization. These are things when you're a day-to-day journalist, you're not really allowed to do. So doing some of that and other fantastic projects like this podcast.
Great. And you're allowed to have an opinion now, too.
So many opinions. So many.
Ottawa. Oh, man.
John.
So I left the Ottawa Citizen and Ottawa Sun in August 2022, and I started full-time teaching at Algonquin College in the journalism program. And it's been amazing. At the time, I remember a new council. It was an election year. A new council was about to come in. Mayor Sutcliffe was to be elected. He was going to be elected in
couple months.
In a couple months, I guess. Yeah. And I just felt like with, covering a few councils up to that point, been at City Hall covering that beat for quite a while. I was ready for a change, and this was a perfect opportunity to switch gears. I've been teaching one course, local government at Algonquin College for multiple years, and an opportunity came to join the faculty and teach in the journalism program. And it's been great ever since, teaching young journalists, bringing in that local government knowledge and seeing our student reporters use some of that knowledge to cover some City Hall issues too. So it's great to see.
Okay. So the municipal panel that you were on previously, that was live, that was on air, that was probably about 10 minutes in length?
About that, yeah.
What's different today, doing this in a podcast format?
Well, I would say one thing is, that was about 9 minutes. 10 minutes would be super long for us, really. And, those issues, we sort of just start to delve into them. And then there's a lot of meaty stuff left over that gets, left on the cutting room floor. It wasn't really even the cutting room floor because we never even recorded it. But we would actually go to the local diner. It was actually Nate's Diner down on Spark Street, and then have what we used to call the real podcast, or the real municipal panel, because we would then get to really dish all the dirt on what we've been seeing at council, on the issues coming, upcoming meetings. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? What do you think of this councillor, that councillor? So a lot of juicy stuff you can't really put on the air because of CRTC rules. And, I think that kind of context, those kind of like little threads that don't really fit in real news, I think that's really interesting to people who actually follow City Hall. And I think that is the kinds of things you can talk about in podcasts. Plus, we're really old, John and I, so we have a lot of institutional knowledge. So old. Well,
I was thinking, Joanne, sometimes we couldn't even leave CBC without continuing the panel outside of the studio proper.
And people come and ask us questions.
And God forbid, there might be someone coming up to be interviewed next on the program, maybe someone from City Hall, maybe a counselor, maybe someone from the NCC. I don't know, but we would have them cornered out in the hallway, and then we had to talk their ear off. But yes, often we go over and have breakfast afterwards and talk about, we gripe about municipal politics. But the interesting thing, Neil, is that, speaking for myself, I was a reporter, right? I wasn't a columnist at the time. I did analysis pieces from time to time in the pages of the Citizen and Sun. But I really could not come in and have an opinion. Often I crossed that line probably on the morning panel. But here in the podcast form, I think we have, and maybe Joanne, you feel the same way, a little bit more liberties to opine or kind of analyze stuff that's going on in municipal politics.
And for me, I had been a columnist actually at the Ottawa Citizen. Then I moved to CBC, where I did analysis, and the line between opinion and analysis was very blurry, but I tried not to cross that. And so I think we can be a little bit more frank.
Great. So listen, this is just a teaser of what's to come. We'll be, as I mentioned, we'll be launching in March. But I've got one last question for the two of you, and that's this council, it's halfway through its term. 2026, it's up for re-election. What do you think will be the big issues that we'll be looking at over the next 2 years?
Well, I mean, the big issue, one of the big top, maybe 1 or 2, 3 issues is transit at all times. Maybe we can all agree on that. I don't know. But like when I was thinking back to covering City Hall, we were talking about how we're going to grow LRT across the city at the time. And here we are. Now we're seeing the rollout of the revamped Trillium line slowly but surely. When we're taping this, they haven't gone to 7 days yet of bringing back the Trillium line. But, you know, there was a time when we're talking about extending LRT to the western suburbs, to the southern suburbs as well. I don't know what's going to happen with LRT expansion in the city because of funding issues, about whether we have the ridership to justify running rail to those suburbs. And also when it comes to the price people pay just to board a bus or train these days too. So I think if I had to pick one issue right now, it would be transit. It's going to be the number one issue going into the next election. And quite frankly, it's going to be always one of the top issues.
How about you, Joanne?
Yeah, I have to say transit as well. I mean, we're not even done figuring out the problems of the last LRT line. You know, we literally do not know the root cause of the derailments. They're, I think, 3 or 4 years old now. Like the fact we don't know that is a problem. The lack of transparency around that. I mean, City Council right now has authorized staff to deal with, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements with the folks who are building the LRT, and we don't even know anything about that. And so I think transit, yes, I agree with everything John said, but they also fit into a bit of some bigger issues, and that is transparency and accountability. Always, I think, a super important thing because, as my old friend David Reevely used to say, if you care about the outcome, you care about the process. And then also, now hold on to your hats. This is very explosive stuff. The fiscal framework. I know that's what everyone wants to talk about, but roads, pipes, infrastructure, transit, these are the things, these are the building blocks of our city. And we do not have the money for that. We cannot tax our way out of this because the property taxes are not really meant to deal with the breadth of what we do in the city. As well, we haven't kept up, you know, so it's very nice to pay 2% increase. I know nobody wants to pay taxes. I don't want to pay them. But for many years, I wrote very unpopular columns saying, I don't think this is enough money. And turns out it's not enough money. And we are the only major city in this province that has not raised their taxes 8%, 9%, or 10%. Other cities have done it. We've refused to do that. So I think those fiscal issues are going to come home to roost in the next couple of years. They're going to be harder and harder to deal with. But I do think we also need a better deal with the federal and provincial governments because we are literally have a tax system that was invented 200 years ago, and cities have changed a little bit since then.
They certainly have. So transit and finances, you know, I think there might be a couple of sleeper issues that we should keep our eye on. I think sprung structures, we have not we have not heard the last of those.
No, definitely. And
the other wild card too is Trump. Trump seems to infiltrate everywhere, and so who knows how that will translate into city affairs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and in a slightly more indirect way, the Trump factor is what is propelling these provincial elections that are happening right now as we tape this. I think it might be over by the time we start the podcast, so that'll be a good first issue. And what happens at the province is so important for cities because they control cities, right? And so absolutely, like with the province more and more focused on Trump, with Premier Ford getting a lot out of these tariff threats, then do city issues go by the wayside, right? So we'll see when we talk next time how much actually city issues even ended up on the campaign trail, and it's because of Trump.
And just cities themselves are thinking about, they're putting their mind to what are they going to do in this, what looks to be a trade war right now with our southern neighbors. I saw at Ottawa City Hall, they're starting to think about what is Ottawa City Hall our municipal government going to do in this trade war? So they feel they have to take a stand. The mayor, some councillors who are on the finance committee, they're going to go into the budget and find out what supplies they're buying from the United States maybe, and maybe take some action. I bet they're just kind of like feel good motions, I'm going to guess, at city council. But we'll see. At this time, we don't know yet. But I think Trump does loom large over every single government, federal, provincial, and also municipal.
It's understandable, but also a good excuse not to talk about
Yes.
actual real issues that we have to deal with.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So on that note, listen, this is a sneak peek of what we can expect in the future. Thanks to you two for coming out today. We'll look forward to continuing the discussion, and we're looking forward to all of you joining us on the Better Ottawa podcast. Thanks very much.